May not heard any of that.
What'd you say?
Hey, Carl, did you hear anything? You might have been muted the entire time.
Muted. Can't hear him. He's trying to talk, but volume.
He's muted right now. He mutes himself.
I didn't want to mute it.
Well, you should have. All right, I'm gonna give it a redo, a mulligan here. Welcome to the Driving Site Utilization Committee meeting of Monday, April 4th, 2022. It's formally advised that is required by Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16th, 2021. The Driving Site Utilization Committee will hold a public meeting, date and time noted on the meeting notice, and the public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternative public access providers.
Okay, thank you. Just in time.
Hey.
I'm Jim Saban. I'm the chair of the Drive-In Site Committee. I will start with a roll call of our members. Susan Britta.
Here.
Bud Nugent.
Here.
David Reed.
Present.
Steve O'Neill.
Present.
Here.
Bilski. Looks like all of our members are present. So we have a quorum and we can begin. So typically what I like to do is just jump right into things and turn it right over to Eric. So Eric, do you want to start with picking up where we left off? And
Great, I will. Let me share my screen there.
Kyle, there's no way to kill this.
Try it out. It's not like an house.
Do not
Shut off.
On the penalty of.
There's a note on the lifted up to do not shut off.
It's all by the wall now, fit remote now.
All right, we'll do the best we can to give you an update on some of the things we've been working on. So this was the agenda we put together last week. So we talk a little bit about the pump station, and we've got a little bit of input on that. And it is working with our driveway, but it's a tight fit. So we'll look at that a little bit. The restroom, we've had a couple meetings about the restroom. One most recently with DPW. So talk about kayak launch. We were able to get some good weather and do some soundings. And so we've got more detail on how the kayak launch is coming together. And then also some updates on the boardwalk. So this is sort of the overview of the entrance drive. This is the color rendering of it. It's got the island coming in. It's got the left turn and the right turn lane out. And it's got that kind of textured edge on the east side. That's a reinforced turf system that allows a flexible 3-lane configuration. And the police really wanted to be able to maintain that so they could have 2 lanes in or 2 lanes out, or configure it however the event might require it. So that gives them flexibility without an excessive amount of pavement. So we really just kind of open it up at the entrance with the island and the left and right turn lanes. And so then what we did is we shared this with CDM Smith, and those folks are the ones that are working on the pump station itself. And so this was their concept sketch they came back with. So they're kind of zoomed in right at the intersection of 28. And I don't know, Kathy, you want to give them a little overview of
What CDM was tasked with was saying, okay, we want to have our entrance this way with a 6-foot island in the center. Are you going to be able to fit in your pump station in the area that you have left, including having the setbacks from the isolated wetland of 35-foot, no disturbance, and a 50-foot. You can see in the green there's a 35-foot and the 50-foot, so they didn't quite meet all of that. But what they're showing here is a lot of grade change. They not only need to get above the base flood elevation, but because they're a critical facility, they need to be 3 feet above. So they need to be at a base, at a first floor elevation, I believe, of 14, when somewhere around in that area might be 6 in this particular location. So that's why you're seeing a lot of grading going on here. They also have a lot of stormwater management that's being proposed here. What we have for most of our stormwater management is actually the porous pavement. So we don't need to have a lot of structured or surface stormwater. So that's something that we need to take a look at, because we really want the entrance to look a lot nicer than having a stormwater basin and a lot of grading in the front. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done here. They have a retaining wall. Obviously, we can soften some of that with some vegetation, but they also have their generator on top of that. So we want to start taking a look at maybe if we can move some of these things around, maybe move it a little bit closer to Route 28. We really want this to be a much nicer entrance to our park and not just something where somebody drives by or rides by on the bike path going, what is that thing over there? So we got a lot of work to do, but this was just kind of giving them a general idea, or us a general idea, whether they might be able to make it fit or not. And I think there's still a lot of work to do, but I think they did manage to show that they could probably put their pump station in the area that's left over. You might need some special dispensation or some retaining walls from the Conservation Commission. It all is a function of whether they go with porous pavement or not. One of the things, we did meet with the DPW and talked about the pump station a little bit as well. And they really want to get a little bit more detailed information on the porous pavement, because if you have a lot of turning movements and turning radiuses, they're seeing some places where it could be, depending on the mix that's used, it could kind of fragment. So Beta is going to be looking at that recipe a little bit more closely to make sure that we're not going to have any issues if they decide to go with porous pavement here or our porous pavement that we're proposing.
So is this the transformer? I mean, is this
It's a
the
generator.
generator? Nice.
Right on top of the retaining wall. So it's like a 5-foot retaining wall and then another 6 foot or slope. So 7 foot generator on top. So it's not the best location. So obviously we need to do a lot
Right.
of work to try and move some stuff around, but this was their first shot of being completely mechanical. Can we fit it in there? What can we
Right.
do? And now there's a lot of work that can be done to finesse it and make it look nicer. Oh, I'd
Maybe 40 by 60 or something like that. It's got a couple of,
it's very deep.
wings and it's got grading and weirs and there's access hatches around it. That's the area to the south there. You can see that little rectangle,
That's for the
Right.
odor control.
odor control pad itself. And then there's a loading dock on the end on the side of the building, transformer and a generator.
They're gonna raise this 10 feet above what it is.
The transformers gotta be above flood too.
Yes, and not just as a
I
critical
know,
facility is 3
yeah.
feet above.
So the retaining wall is gonna be 6 feet high, and then above that, it's gonna be another 6. So the top of that generator is gonna be 12 feet above.
It's going to be very visible. Yeah. Yeah. So whether this is something we have been talking a little bit before the meeting, whether that's something that they can kind of blend into the side of the building some way or make it not stand
Right.
out quite so much. So there's some work that needs to be done to improve the aesthetics.
Do you know how deep the sump is on this thing?
I want to say, what, 25 feet or
I
something?
don't,
It's very
I don't
deep.
recall.
Because you might be able to get a deeper sump and make it a little bit smaller, but
Yeah.
it's storage
This
capacity.
ended up being, now that this is a Yarmouth only solution for the treatment,
It's bigger.
it's bigger.
Yeah.
And CDM has been very cooperative in trying to work with you to try to find a solution to make this all fit, I'm assuming.
Yes, they want to work with us and try and make it, but they don't have an architect. I think what they really need is an architect on.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we might be falling down a little bit. There's some site work that can be done. They have a
Yeah.
landscape architect involved, but they don't really have an architect. What they were proposing for the building really looked very much like a residential cape. It didn't look particularly interesting per se, but it was
Right.
fairly innocuous. But now you're going to find that the first floor elevation's here and the ground's here. So they're,
Right.
what do you do with that? Right now they're grading it up and having steps, but do you want to like bring the siding down? There's a lot of
Right.
things that need to be done.
My suggestion would be you get rid of any pretenses that's a house.
Yeah.
You remove
Agree.
all the access from 28 and you push it back as far and you do vegetated buffer. You want to hide this thing as much as possible. There's no, I mean, most of them, they're usually on a concrete pedestal that lifts it up to the first floor and you almost have like a balcony around it for access.
We have a little bit of difficulty here because
Yeah.
we are developing the park using the Village Center Overlay District, which
Right.
requires any buildings to be located close to the front, within 15 to 20 feet of street, trying to create that streetscape. So trying to move something back and hiding it might require some change from the V.
20 years or so.
But I do think your comment about maybe not making it a residential in appearance and making it
Right.
maybe more maritime, more like a boathouse or some sort of
That's a good
commercial
idea.
structure.
Actually,
You know,
maritime, yeah.
Bigger scale would
Yeah.
accommodate some of these features and maybe
Right.
it doesn't need doors then necessarily facing 28.
Right.
What was the chance of getting an architect on board from CDM to look at this?
I'd have to talk to Jeff about it.
I think it's a good point.
All right, let's go to restrooms, considering there's not a lot we can say about that.
Yeah, sure. In terms of the restrooms, the floor plan, just been working on the mechanical systems a little bit. The concept is on the north end of the building, there's a mechanical room, which is kind of shaded here in yellow. That would have a janitor's closet, and then the wet side with the backflow preventer and the piping, and then the dry side, which would be more of the electrical equipment. A center aisle between the restrooms then, which is where the plumbing all comes in and is connected, because this is not going to be a four-season facility, so they need to be able to drain everything down at the end of the season. And then right now we're still carrying the office space, a kind of a flex space in the front on the southern end of the building. So it could be someone said maybe some storage in there possibly, and certainly a flexible use in that space, and that's about 10 feet wide.
So the southern end being the end that would be facing Seagull Beach.
Correct, the event space facing into the
People
park.
So,
And we'll kind of can go into some of the plan views of that as well.
And we had mentioned early on about this office space possibly being shared by any of the groups that might, or the performers that might be performing. That's still, I don't want to.
I think that was when we had the discussion about having the restroom facilities closer to the potential staging
Oh, right,
area.
you're right.
But now it's more like the idea of being able to use it for ticketing and for
Yeah,
other
good point.
administrative purposes for the event space.
it's really a flex space.
Yeah.
It sounded like there was a lot of different things that this space might be able to be used for. So it's not really programmed or defined at this particular.
Multi-use.
As long as it's,
If that's, I guess the question is, are we sure that we want to have something at that end that provides this flex space? Is that true?
I'll go around the room. Susan, do you have?
Oh, sure. As long
Yeah, I
as we have the otherwise it'd be just a smaller building, right?
Yeah.
No, if we have the opportunity, you can always use them. It can always be used.
I think if when we tweak this plan a little bit, so there's only one door into the that I'm called the office, because that's what you got here. Maybe there's a window or something that if there are opportunities that we have to use it for ticketing or something, there's a window to.
I think if you
There
look,
might be something flood, et cetera, but I don't know.
I think we also wanted to have windows so that you could like also observe a lot of of the park, the artist shanties, the parking lot, and then a lot of the event space.
can you
So it
just,
doesn't show windows, but I'm assuming.
Yeah, there's some elevation.
Right, yeah,
But
we'll
yeah.
come up with things, but that's a good comment, and maybe the window could be set up that way.
this whole thing got moved,
Yeah.
get moved down.
At the fork in the road.
Yeah, I mean, maybe along with what Jim's saying, maybe like a slider wherever the view is, and it could be used like a ticket counter or observation or sell concessions out of it even if somebody wanted to.
Yep.
You do have flexibility.
Probably the biggest piece would be that we bring, paving up to that window so that,
Right.
because we'd have a drip edge around and so on, and some planting so that we could let the public access that. Let me just flip to the next one, because that kind of shows, you can see the two windows there on the,
It was the original, I remember one of the concepts, you basically had a sidewalk in that whole structure.
right.
If that's still the idea, that could work out.
We still do, yeah, at this point in time anyway, the orientation, just because the mechanical room on the north,
Right.
the bathrooms are separated by gender, east and west, and then
Right.
the south side ends up being that kind of flex space, if you will. And this is a kind of a side view of it. This is still developmental, but the concept now is a pre-engineered building, so it's a design that's developed like kind of out of a kit of parts, if you will. So it's all pre-engineered in a way that you make your selections, and then the building in a lot of cases is shipped as components, and then it's assembled on site. It also, there could be flexibility. It could be built up locally, depending if it's cost competitive to do that locally. But at this point in time, we're looking at a pre-engineered design just because there's some efficiencies to that kind of system. There's lots of different options with pre-engineered buildings, cedar shingle, plank, clapboard. We'll talk about that in a minute. One thing we do know is all the doors need to have that stop log system that we talked about, so that those stop logs can be put in at the end of the season, certainly, and then during any event during the season when it's in operation. So we need to store the stop logs in the building. That's part of that storage space. So all those components are right there, so they can be set into place. And you can see the windows at two different heights. The office, I think there's a better view. Concession is an opportunity there. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
And then the restrooms will have a higher higher. We like to get the natural light in there. You know,
Right.
maybe skylights would be a possibility. I'm not sure that that's something we talked about, but sometimes to get natural light into those spaces, you do something like that.
Right.
What's actually in the mechanical room?
So there'll be a backflow preventer, which protects the water coming in, you know, from the site, disconnecting the main. And then there's a meter in the, as well on the wet side. On the electrical side are the panel boards, so it's the power coming in, and then basically distribution back out to the site. There would be the power supply and a disconnect panel for the tight tank with the future of the pump station for the sanitary sewer to pump up. So that's the other half of the electrical room. There'll be a custodian sink and there'll be storage in there for the stop logs, maybe things like traffic cones or other things that might be part of like operationally over time, or sandwich board signage or other things that may be part of how events work. You may decide, you know, needs to get stored in the building.
Is the roof big enough to have solar panels?
Yeah, Kathy and I were just talking about that earlier. I mean, that's one of the things that might change the way the building looks right now. It's kind of oriented north-south with the roof space. It's not a great orientation for solar. So you look at turning the roof and seeing what kind of array you could get if it ran, you know, east-west. If that's something the committee's interested in, solar, we'd almost design it with a conventional system and then be able to compare, you know, what the benefits, what a solar system would be, what the array, the size of the array and how it would work. But right now we're not particularly oriented that way. So it's either rotating it 180 degrees or maybe angling it to get better solar orientation.
We should make the effort.
Can you show this plan?
Sure. I'm sorry. Yeah. We can.
Before you jump to one quick question, I see you're proposing CMUs.
Correct.
My question is, because you're using it as a flood wall, wouldn't you have to use a port in place knee wall?
I have to take a closer look at that, and we might have to pour to that elevation. I mean, the CMU would be fully like doweled and grouted
Okay.
all the way, so it wouldn't be open block. What we're talking about is the CMU is a concrete, you know, concrete block. We think would be the construction of the building, at least the lower level. The roof would probably be a wood frame truss. This one, we show it as if the block is visible on the bottom. And I think the example we were looking at, you can see it on the lower image. The example we're looking at is like the DPW facility has the architectural block on the bottom. You have that option to sort of highlight the bottom if you wanted to and have that kind of block visible. It does make the building a little longer and narrower. And then the top option, we just showed the siding kind of coming all the way down to the ground. Behind that would be the concrete or the block to protect from flooding.
So if I can quickly ask, are you suggesting that this is the style of what you want to?
So we're moving, so we're moving in that direction. We can talk about that in a little bit more detail in terms of the finishes, you know, and materials. Is that what you're asking when you say style?
Look of the building?
Yeah, so generally this
This
is
is like a barracks. I don't like the look of it at all. So I'm very honest. I think it's ugly.
so we haven't developed a lot of the architectural, you know, treatments, and so we can work through that with you and I think refine it somewhat. So what you're seeing is kind of a function of the floor plan was this decision,
Right.
the way the spaces lay out inside, and sort of translate that into a footprint, and then you build up the elevation views. So I guess one of the first questions would be, you know, do you like the idea of the exposed block on the bottom or the siding going all the way down?
I like the second one on the right at the top. The siding coming down.
Coming all the way down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Agree.
I don't think it makes a difference one way or the other unless this is what we're going to commit to as the style of this building.
Well, I think
We're going to change the style of the building or the look of the building. So I look at the other pictures you have, Packet Landing, Smuggler's Beach. Those are, I don't know if I'm going to say this again in my life, attractive looking restrooms. And this looks like a barracks to me.
yeah,
This is not an attractive welcome to
Right.
event space.
right. No, I
This is, hey, look at this barracks we've got in the middle of this room.
think there's
So we've got to fix this.
so I think there's room for improvement. I mean,
There's a lot of room for.
I think that, you know, the first decision is sort of, you know, do you want to see the block on the exterior? Do you like the look of the siding? You know, to me, the block kind of breaks up the view and it makes it sort of more strips, and maybe you're using the word barracks, more barracks like. It's a little bit more maybe industrial in nature to have the block on the bottom. I think there's room to change the roof line and modify the roof line. This is a very flat pitch, you know, so it doesn't have a lot of character to it when it's kind of laid down like that. It's a fairly efficient design, but I think there's options as to what the roof, you know, looks like on top of it. We also kept it simple without any overhangs or awnings or anything like that, which would help the scale and the appearance of the building, if those were to be added.
So a couple of things, and then I'll go around the room. Cost wise, this is the most efficient. It's a straight. I think you're gonna find that measurement is gonna be 42 or 40 feet. I don't think they do.
41, no, it'll round in one direction,
I
yes.
measure a lot of houses and I don't see many odd numbers. Cost very efficient, easy to bring in, it'll come in probably in two pieces.
It's not
Split right down the middle.
prefabricated.
Yeah.
It's
Pre-engineered.
pre-engineered.
Engineered, it still comes in pieces and puts together. You should see the multi-million-dollar house across the street from me that they built. You've seen it, right? That's prefabricated. So you can do an amazing,
This is pre-engineered, not prefabricated, so it's not coming in panels or anything, it's being.
doesn't matter. I got the same general concept. Aesthetically, you can do anything you want with these things. It's basically building your house in a factory and then taking the pieces and reassembling it.
Right. You can add architectural appointments and detail, and absolutely agree with you 100%.
There's a condominium project on Old Wharf Road in Dennis that is all these types of manufactured homes, and they're $1 million houses. They're beautiful. So we don't, with regards to brick or not, to me, brick is not Cape Cod.
Sorry, block, when I say block, yeah.
It's not. So if we can do cedar shingle or vinyl shingle that looks like a cedar shingle, aesthetically, I'm just trying to clean this thing up. Then that's what I would do. I don't think my personal opinion is the concrete block is, if we're building this in Middleborough, maybe, but we're not, we're building, in Cape Cod. I want this building to look as Cape Cod-y and as much like the rest of the buildings in town that we can, personal opinion. I'll go around the room and let everybody else add what they want. Susan, do you have any?
Better windows. I think the window treatment, overhangs would make a big difference. Is there gonna be a walkway around this entire, any possibility of putting some sort of a fence and then having, poles attached to like a little porch kind of look around the outside of it? But definitely the windows.
It would be possible. Like one idea we had early on was off the office end of the building, the southern end, which is going to be due south, or more or less south, is have some overhang there with posts and have like a space outside the office that was covered, perhaps. It would add a lot of interest to that end of the building.
What about
functional?
Can you take that idea and bring it around the entire building? Or is it?
You certainly could. It adds a lot of your sort of building space that's not
Right.
it's aesthetically valuable, but not functional. Right. That'll be your challenge.
What you're talking about, Susan, is basically like what's a packet landing.
Kind of like that.
And what you would do is it's a post and beam shell, and then the actual wall for the structure would be set in 5 to 6 feet from that. And then you would have these posts and stuff, you'd have the hip roof, and then that wall set in, so we give it depth and texture and shadowing and all those great things. You'd have an overhang over the sidewalk area, so if it was raining.
Can I ask, it seems like the shape is a question, because what you're talking about is elongate the building even more. Is this a case where we're looking to have some type of L shapes more similar to Smugglers, or are we looking, you don't mind the length per se?
I think it's styling,
It's
is what
styling.
I'm hearing. It's basically, that's just a box versus you could do the same thing they've shown there with this. And basically this wall would be inset 5 feet. So basically you would have the columns all around it. That would encircle the building.
Yeah, like Packet has a really nice roof. It's a hip roof, where the roof kind of angles in at the
You can do
end.
the
So it
same
kind of
thing.
eliminates that
Right.
gable in, right? You can see in that image, you can see how the ends
Right.
are kind of more relaxed, right?
And
So
you
it's a
could-
little visually, it's a little less
Hip
imposing.
roof is a hip roof.
Yeah,
Right.
with the hip with the four
I mean,
corners.
it's a composition roof, and then you could use like one of those CertainTeed cement shingles that like they simulate wood shakes, but
Right.
wouldn't have the
Yeah.
maintenance issue.
DPW would kind of insist on that anyway,
Right.
because for maintenance purposes.
The cement one's right. The
Hardy
vinyl
plank.
can kind of lift
Yeah.
off in
Yep.
severe weather.
If you have to
The
do your
hardy plank's
stone
pretty
wall,
good.
if you have to do your CMU,
No, you don't have to see it. It's entirely an
because
aesthetic.
if you had to, one of the options is to certainly face that with, a stone look to it. You can aesthetically change the look of it if you have to do it.
Yeah, actually, I
But
think
I think you have a picture of one
I was thinking
somewhere.
Couple.
Yeah, the, where's
Yeah,
the hardy board is picture.
right. So that's
So you
the
can
veneer.
always do that to
Mhm.
cover that concrete up,
You
but
can do all kinds of things with like that wainscoting with split face.
which is my point exactly. Let's clean up this building. It looks like a barracks. So if we can do something architecturally to get it to look simple, I think it's important that our buildings try to have similarity between our different beaches and venues. So, I mean, there's some similarity between Smugglers and Packet Landing and Seagull Beach. They all kind of have some Cape Cod-y look to it that I think we need to try
Right.
to blend some of those together to get this to look like that.
In question, because this is gonna be a seasonal structure and that's its intention how to operate, it won't have heat. So do we need to comply with energy codes? Could we get away with not putting insulation, all this,
Right. It
Other
won't, it
stuff.
won't,
Yeah.
it won't be insulated.
right, which is
yep,
good
it'll
for
be
fear had flooding issues. So it's a good
CMU.
thing.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And, I think that, like, for instance, if you look at the bottom, well, either one of these views, as you approach the building, you could do a small shed roof or
There you
something
go.
over
That's right.
the door where you're kind of directing
Right,
people to.
right.
So, maybe it doesn't have to get longer, but maybe there's a way that architecturally we can do something
We
on the
have a
side
gable
to be
end
more welcoming.
Right.
Yeah, you can put all kinds of even useless architectural design to it that doesn't have any function, but improved design.
Looks better.
The key here is that this is the first thing you're gonna look at when you come into this facility. So it has to look nice, in my opinion.
And so to that end, just thinking about the finishes, I think we talked about not seeing the block and running the siding down. Smugglers is a wide horizontal upward style. Hardy plank is something you would use. Is that a look that you like, or would you prefer like a packet shingle, which is a little bit more
That's
traditional?
truly shingle.
Yeah, wood
Well,
shingle.
I'll tell you that the hardy board is gonna give you a much longer life expectancy. So I would, and even, this is a clapboard look, but just like anything else, you can get this stuff.
You can get hardy
Oh, they have a
plank and
shingle.
even
Shingle,
shingles
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So it's a preference of whether you're interested in clapboard or interested in the shingles. We can get the material.
Yeah, I mean, I think you gotta see the design of the building to decide.
Right, there was a reason, for some reason, packet is wood shingle, right? So it's a very traditional approach to that, but I don't know if that's
And it-
necessary here.
Because it's in the
Historic district, yeah,
Right.
because it works. So here, I think we could use a hardy plank type of material.
Same
DPW,
look.
right, and
Yeah.
DPW wanted, or they prefer an asphalt shingle roof over a metal roof. It was their,
Mhm.
50 years, we'll be done,
yeah, right,
we'll be
right.
dead and gone before. they do the one.
Do we want to get back to the solar question? Because I think
Yeah,
that
you
matters.
wanted me to find a plan that we. can
So-
Go back
right,
up to- yeah, do you have it?
So
Yeah,
what
this
would
is-
solar provide? I mean, what
Oh, yes.
utilities are we having in there that would
Slight.
just a light?
I mean,
We're gonna have power to the building already.
Fans.
And if we
I'm sorry, I thought you were.
I'm sure we have one. This is-
If we could position it right, well, I can't do it with bathrooms. I was gonna say, when you have windows, you can, but you can't do that with bathrooms.
Going back to your design thing too, the only thing that some might consider a drawback is solar on a building right there next to 28. I mean, personally, I've never.
Well, we're
solar.
it's way back,
what it looks like.
and it would be on the southern side, which means it wouldn't be seen from 28, it would be seen by the boardwalk.
Yeah, okay.
So, positionally, there's no trees to get in the way. I mean, it would probably generate decent.
I guess the question is, what is the power that's generated is gonna be used for what? Just the lights?
We buffer space, we will be doing some.
Actually, it won't be used at all on site. It'll be net meter because it won't be used at all in the building because you're gonna need the lights at night when the sun's not shining. So in theory, it'll make a certain spin backwards and it should offset.
Stand in the picture, make
Yeah.
everybody turn around.
Well, it's only Carl, I guess,
Tell me, Carl. It's just you, Carl.
and the public.
So I'll put this, sorry. So I thought we have a slide of it kind of showing the way the restroom, but you can see it's sort of longer and this is kind of, I guess, southeast access.
Where's the north arrow?
Goes towards Route 28.
28's there, probably under that title block.
Okay,
So, so the way it's oriented right now is sort of have a staircase up and then bringing people to kind of the front of the building, which would be where the office is. And then there would be signs on the building, male, female for the 2 restrooms, the mechanical room at the end. And then there's an accessible ramp or walkway down, and then a stair down the other side at this point is what we're thinking. So you can kind of see it sort of looks to the river, looks to the event space, but there's also views to the east for the artist fannies as far as the office space goes. So if we got serious about really looking at how we could do solar, rotating it a little bit or maybe.
It was the other way,
Turning it
wouldn't it? If
entirely.
you were rotating it.
I'm gonna
That
say this
way.
is probably east-west to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
more or
this.
less. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
is that
We
gonna
wanna
fit
be on
though?
rotated its long
Yeah.
axis that in
So
that direction.
You're not gonna have as much visibility like if you were in that office space monitoring an event.
Original, this one, you can see it's not under the floor.
Eric, what if we looked at, so you don't have it up there, but if we look at the floor plan,
Sure.
the entrances are on the gable ends. You've got an entrance on the gable end for the,
Just for the office.
just for the.
Just for the office. No, there's lots of different layouts we could look at. I think one of the things that drives this organization is sort of, ideally the plumbing is back to back, but it's separated by this wet hall, right? And so that's kind of a functional component, is a kind of a long axis with this hall
Right.
in the center.
What would happen if you did office, mechanical, and then put the doors on the end going towards?
Maybe north face, kind of
I'm
north.
trying to
face.
figure it out. Yeah, I'm trying to see. It's like,
Yeah, that's.
would that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different options. It's sounding like you're not happy with the fit aesthetically or the fit on the site. So we can go back, keeping the core the way it is and look at, if we flip the ADA restrooms to the other end, could you possibly, come in from the northern end with a covered entrance where both restrooms access and maybe work with the office. I think I have an image of a project we recently completed. This one in the lower, kind of middle, right, you can see the covered piece and then the 2 restrooms in that space. This one's a composting facility, but it shows you sort of how the covered space works in that scenario.
Those pillars were weight,
Well,
like
what's,
here.
Right, you can match that aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of porch look. And if you wanted, like as Susan was saying, if you wanted to carry that around some portion of the building,
right,
Oh, one of these on the roof too, no?
yeah, the wood, I'm sorry, the asphalt shingle, yeah, on the left-hand side of the screen.
look at the cupola with the lights
Talking about-
on the posts, actually had a nice character. I guess, what is everybody's opinion? Do you like the idea of the doors for the restrooms being on opposing sides of the building? Do you think that's better during an event? Or is it better if it's all on one wall? So you have, his and hers next to each other? And
Steve,
what
you got any-
functions better, do you
Any
think?
opinion?
I like that on one wall.
You can see the bottom left too has a nice image with cedar shingles. So there's a drinking fountain in the middle and then the two restroom doors.
Susan, do you have any opinion?
In a big event, though, having the 2 on one wall gets congested a little.
Okay,
Maybe if for a large event, it might be better to bring them up and then separate them. I like the idea of the common walkway, getting them up onto the platform.
get around the building.
and
Right. Right.
Men to the right, women
It's
to the
like
left.
traffic
Okay,
calming.
Non-binary.
Yeah, right. To not bring it all to the same.
Just two.
a big crowd, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense,
we're-
yeah.
But we won't go there.
I think whatever works for you. I don't think it matters to me preference wise, whether the both entrances are together or on opposite walls. Whatever, I don't think that should drive your design, I guess is what I'm saying, whatever works best. But
Yeah, I agree with Dave. I completely agree. To me, it's all about the aesthetics. of the
Aesthetic,
building.
yeah.
Functionality will be what it will be, but it's gonna be the thing people are gonna see first.
Yeah.
So we've got to make sure that has some kind of, and I think with that ranch style, you can dress them up, by putting some, overhangs, putting a cupola, doing with this kind of look. I think we just need to clean up the aesthetics of it. But functionally, I think whatever you recommend is going to be okay with us. And I like Susan's idea of separating the entrances so that there's not congestion at once.
Yeah.
That does make
Vegetation,
sense.
Yeah, the vegetation that's gonna be out front will also, I think, play a huge part in how it looks as you
Right.
drive in there. First
Is it-
thing you see
Yeah.
something native grasses and stuff like that.
It is elevated, right? So no matter what you do, so that's a reason, to some perspectives, to keep the building a lower profile because it's elevated longer and low. But
Right.
I understand, your comments and we can definitely work on improving it. I think the big decision point is, if you think about that southeast facing end of the building, is that a public space with maybe an overhang and an office, or is it 2 restroom doors? And I think what I heard you say is it's okay if it's an office and the restrooms are on the sides as we're
Well,
showing.
If I can, I kind of like the idea of overhangs at the entrances to the bathroom doors, because if it's raining and there's a
I
line.
think they'll change the geometry of the building and
You know what
maybe
I
you
mean?
have one of these with a gable end.
That could
Over the
accommodate,
door.
that could accommodate that.
So we're almost talking about if the packet landing model is what we're looking for. So we're basically talking about a post and beam structure.
Yeah.
With a concrete
Mhm.
CMU or port in place knee wall set in.
Inside.
Enough to have a walk around the building. And with some kind of shingle, a cement, like a certainty type.
Yeah, on the treatment rather than a
Right.
collaborative.
I thought you were talking about like having a wrap.
The other one right inside.
Detail on something that comes out and has the overhang, not that we were.
This could be
doing
your
that.
entrance into the bathroom.
That's what you're talking
This is all
about.
over.
Yep.
So basically overhang around the structure with post and beams with lighting, and it seemed like there was interest in the cupola concept.
Yes.
Take the existing building that you have that's very nondescript and set it right inside that.
And see where we can go.
Yeah.
Right, thematically.
It's
Yeah,
gonna be $1 million building. I mean, it's gonna be.
Well, it doesn't have to be post and beam and all
we
that.
get stimulus money.
I mean, Kathy makes a good point. It is, I think the
You're
budgeting
gonna-
for this was pretty
yes.
modest originally. So, but until you commit to something on paper and have an idea and say, yes, this is what we want, then we can go through the
It'll be
process of
somewhere in
estimating.
between. How's that? It will be more embellished than this, but not quite as fancy as
Right.
Packet
Break the
Landing.
bank.
Packet Landing was what, $400,000, and it has 2 restrooms and a deck.
Yeah,
Um,
I think what we're all saying, what you just said is,
Yeah.
nothing more than this,
As long as you understand, it's
Not-
gonna be available.
not as expensive.
Right.
Get us close
Sorry, I
to
didn't mean to turn your back.
Okay, so I think you got the general idea about that.
Yeah.
Right.
pretty.
Yeah.
All right, Eric, what else you got?
We'll keep working. So we went through some of the finishes on the outside and we'll come back to you with that. I think you said shingle would be okay or clapboard, either.
Cape- Just think like Cape Cod.
I think shingles.
If you like
get
the
it with
sand
wood.
dunes and so.
Cement shingle.
Cupola, did you talk cupola?
Yes.
Yes.
Kinda cool.
If
Okay.
it was illuminated, that'd be. great.
Illuminated.
That's been waiting to get put up for a couple months. I can probably get it.
But the thing is you could do prefab beam.
can ask
it can
the
be,
small.
Shop can make it, and plus you can use panelized construction.
You're right, there are some
So-
efficiencies we can
yeah.
develop along.
It doesn't have to be stick built on site.
Just put it
Sure.
on it At the end of.
No, got some ideas on that. All right.
Thanks,
Maybe
Dad.
I'll-
Need to go to Hawaii and investigate cupolas in Hawaii.
Well,
Next
actually,
destination.
why
trip.
don't we get the, actually, if you just, why don't we get the Votech school out here to build it for us?
Maybe there's pieces that they could help with.
Hey, Jim, how about we get the Votech school to come out here and build it? It is supposed to be. I mean, they do projects like this. I mean, it's a great public.
You match some funding to
Well, we
that.
fund all the materials and everything, but they build it, so you get free labor. I mean, it's gonna
It's
take.
not free labor. They're not free.
Well, it takes longer,
You
but yeah.
can't do that. It's like illegal because they.
Well,
It is
minimum wage,
it is a town project as well,
Right.
and state wage rates and
The 14.
and so,
I
yeah.
mean, there's a process, but one of my notes to myself with
Yeah.
regards to naming is having a discussion, and we'll get to it, is public-private partnerships on some of this stuff.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
an initiative like that on this building, maybe you could build some really great partnerships to get the building to happen.
Sort of like the Yarmouth Police Foundation.
And the same thing they did with the LaRusso building at Flax Pond.
Hmm.
So, I mean, we have some stuff. Anyway, I don't want to get to that.
Sure. Two more things then to go. I know David has some limitations on timing. Canoe and Kayak, just wanted to update you on that. So this is a summertime view of a Boa Cove, sort of there on the river. Been talking about sort of facilities like this initially, in terms of how the launch might work. There'd be a gangway down and then a float. Working with Carl and others in natural resources, sort of refined this idea a little bit and kind of pursuing the wedge shaped up on the upper right. So the kind of zero entry type of float. So where you can kind of paddle on, paddle off in terms of the design. So that's sort of where the process moved to in terms of thinking about it a little bit. We've been looking at some of these other options that have, almost wings or fingers that stick out that allow like a slip where the paddleboard or the kayak can kind of fit into that. We reviewed that in more detail with Carl this week, and I think the feeling was, something that was more flexible like this, that had provisions in specific areas for launching, but also had the flexibility of sort of a more open space in the middle. Would be more flexible for different types of canoes, kayaks, paddleboards to use it. I think the consideration we're looking at is if we had a scenario like this, providing for grab rails so that, it would help you kind of get down into the water, or likewise, be able to pull yourself up. So we're looking at sort of universal access in terms of disabled folks, how they might be able to use the facility. Maybe there's a transfer platform or a little bench that's mounted to the float so that you can go from whatever your position is to sitting on this bench, then into the kayak itself. And these examples, I think, are what we feel like would work best, based on the work out there. The sounding work, I guess I can show you this. Looks like this. So we went out, the weather combined and just availability. We had a hard time doing this in February, but we got to it in March. We're able to go through the soundings. And you can see it's kind of a bowl shape. There's not a real clear channel through this area. It's quite open, but there is this sort of targeted zone where the water is a little bit deeper here. And that's where we're headed to try to put the floats in the water.
So is the idea behind having floats there as opposed to just natural sound and stuff for people to not disturb the area by walking in it?
Yeah, it's salt
Yeah.
marsh.
Unfortunately, you'd have to, you have to cross the salt marsh today, and dragging, you can see in this view, dragging that emergent grass that's there, dragging, and it's probably been done historically, but if you really bring people to this park and focus that activity there, I don't think that's going to work for the vegetation, to survive long term. So the goal is to get them over and then onto this.
So the
onto
loop
this
would be
float.
like the next panel like that?
I think
With the ramp area itself, but you'd have a ramp to go down like that onto that other
correct.
type of
Correct.
swim on thing.
Yeah, and we're working on design concepts that don't rely on these kind of pilings. We're working on anchors that could be in the floor of the river with a flex mooring line, so that the idea is you wouldn't have as much visual stuff, components around it, and the mooring lines would be set up to allow the floats to go up and down and for weeks and so on. So it's that kind of look, but it would have the wedge-shaped platform at the bottom.
Would it be a piling or something for the ramp?
Yes. Yep.
Because I'm just trying to think, so it's easy for Carl to put it in and take it out.
Correct.
It's not a major undertaking.
Right. We've been talking with them about how to do that best.
The channel mark.
Operationally, are we thinking of a concessionaire to do the kayak rentals and things?
Possibly. I mean, we're trying to have like a little kiosk, so to speak, where someone could rent out different kayaks. We don't, obviously, we'd have to go through a whole process for that. But we would also have the racks there. You see around a lot of different recreational
Right,
areas where they rent
Like a
down racks.
Egg vessel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Beach.
So that would be helpful to people.
Yeah.
So,
Give maybe like an extra artist shanty building, that'd be for the
Somewhat,
kayak. Yeah,
yeah.
so like the rentals that take place just across the river in Dennis at the, just across the river on the left there.
Yeah, they don't.
Veterans Park or whatever.
It's a possibility, obviously it's how interested someone would be in having it and how frequent and how much money they could make.
You put out the bid and if.
But we also
Exactly.
saying the public could just ride up with their kayak and.
Yes.
Ride right under.
Exactly.
Okay.
Bring your own
Yeah,
kayak.
if you bring your own kayak, yeah, I think that's what
Bring
they
your
do
beer.
over at the Bass River Bridge. If you pull up with your own kayak, you can rent, and they have theirs to rent as well, so.
So it's the equivalent of a town landing as well as
Right.
rental.
and actually Carl will know, would we want a rack? And is there, do we do that now? We have a rack and you pay like a fee
Yes,
to
Yes,
to
that's
what
store
we
it?
do
or-
now.
Okay,
Yeah, if you go to Bass Hole, before you get to the park, just as you get to the parking lot, there's a
Right.
dirt area. There's a rack on the right-hand side.
Okay.
And people pay a fee to keep their kayaks there, just like
Okay.
okay, she's,
I would
I've
for
met a
my
lot of
mooring
places,
or
Dennis Pond.
boat slip.
okay,
Not as
Yeah,
much. But they do charge a
Right.
fee.
Kind of like a bike rack for your kayak.
Yeah.
It is.
there's not a 10-year,
Exactly.
there's not a 10-year waiting period?
Yeah.
there
It's only
is
10.
a tremendous,
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So
Carl has, yeah, I know. Carl, you have something to add, but
Well, since you guys were picking on me most of the meeting, I finally worked up enough anger to speak.
Oh,
No,
Carl.
there's a tremendous, absolute tremendous need and desire for rack storage, especially for paddle style boats. We sell out all of our racks pretty much in an 8-hour period. This year, I think we sold out Bass Hole in the first 3 hours, and that was simply people waiting in line to come in to rent those racks. So they are very popular. A facility where there's close proximity parking and a relatively calm area to kayak in, I think there'd be quite a demand.
Carl, this is Jim. Couple quick questions for you if I can. Looking at this, the chart with the soundings, can you give us a general idea of that, of where the actual channel for boating? Is it like right where that arrow is now? Or is it still, are we in the channel right there, or how far out does that?
Well, Parker's River was dug out back in the 40s, 50s. There really is no per se channel for the bulk of that river. The mouth is maintained and is dredged, so there's definitely a distinctive channel. But as you get up inside, it varies from anywhere from 6 to 9 feet, all depending on where areas have been excavated. For example, this little bowl here was excavated and the fill was placed on the opposite side, and they filled the salt marsh over there. So, and the bowl down south of that was also used to fill large sections of the salt marsh on the east side of the river. So that river is just a natural river. I don't know of any dredging that has occurred since the creation of the Gateway Isle neighborhood there. So, it's something that we will need to look into down the road if we start getting any, significant changes in sediment transport. But for the most part, it's a pretty benign system ranging between 6 and 9 feet as you go all the way down from Skippy's Marina all the way down to the Red Jacket.
Oh, 6 to 9 feet. So there's no channel markers in there.
No, there's not. Since
Okay.
we don't maintain the area, it's pretty much you stay in the center, and that's pretty much where you have the best water.
Got it. Okay, now the next question is, just out of curiosity, what type of fee are you charging for a kayak rack?
The fee that we charge is the same as the smallest mooring fee, which is $150 per space. This year, because we've had such a huge demand and the spaces are large enough to accommodate 2 kayaks, if someone wants to put 2 of their own kayaks in one spot, then it's $250. So you get a little bit of a break on the second kayak.
Huh?
That's a seasonal charge?
Yeah, seasonal. So pretty much May 1 to November.
So do I get that automatic renewal, or do I got to get in line again the next year?
First come, first serve. You have to get in line.
Build more kayak racks.
That's
Sounds like they're in
what
strong
everybody
demand.
wants.
Yeah,
There is.
That's good. Okay, thank you, Carl. Anything else to add, Carl?
No, it's been great working with Kathy and Eric on trying to bring this concept to something visible. We've been going back and forth. I think we have some really good ideas. We just need to get in touch with some of the vendors to see what they may have that may accommodate what we're looking for. But it's a great concept, user-friendly, manageable for maintenance, in my opinion. So I think we're moving in the right track.
Wonderful. Thank you for your assistance in helping us get this done. We appreciate it. Your
A-
input is valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just need to get it done before the end of May, all right?
I've been saying get it done for a long time.
What made?
What May, right?
Does anybody else have any other questions for Carl while we have him? Hey, thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Very
Carl.
good.
All right,
thank
Eric,
you.
can you pick up Eric and
Will do. Keep going here. Yeah, just a couple last details. When we met with Carl, he recommended enlarging sort of the footprint that I'm showing here on the screen. So we're talking about 16 by 16, 18 by 18, maybe as a square foot size of the float. So there'd be a level portion at the top, maybe 4 to 6 feet wide, and then the sloping transition down. And then the reason the depth of the water and the soundings is important is we want to make sure at low tide, there's still adequate water, underneath the floats. The way this design's set up, and Rich pointed this out to me on the side, we have a section of boardwalk approach that brings you up to an elevation. I'll show you the cross section. And then we have proposing a fixed gangway to span over the salt marsh, and then an incline gangway that moves with the tide as the last span down to the float itself. And so at the concept level, it kind of looks like this. So on the on-land side, coming off the cul-de-sac, slopes up, there'd be a section that would be flat. And the real reason to get up to this height is to maintain the clearance over the marsh as we come down. And then we're working on kind of the way this transition works, but there'd be a sloping gangway that would be fixed but removable should DNR decide that they need to remove it. And then there'd be the hinged piece and the floating gangway, which would come all the way down to the float itself on the bottom.
and that would come off in the winter months.
Right. So the system that we're looking at is the helical anchor. So it would be anchored into the floor, not a mooring block of something like half this table.
Screwed in.
Carl wanted something with a light footprint, and it makes sense here. And we think the system would work. It'd be screwed in. There'd be a buoy to locate it in the spring. Probably the float would be removed, but he says there's not historically big icing problems, so they may elect to just leave the float in. But you could remove the float entirely and the gangway sections as well.
Cool. Anybody else have any?
Is 4 foot wide enough to carry your kayak down the?
You got the drawing still? We're working on Carl had some thoughts about that, and really the concept that he's saying we need to look at in more detail is a way to put the kayak on the rail and let it run down the edge of the rail. So you can like walk it down, if you will. We did a couple concept sketches. So it'd be part of the gangway design would be something to accommodate the kayak. Maybe have somebody at the front with the lead and you bring it down next to you.
Or if you have a concession, they could just sell the little wheels.
To roll down. That's right. Yeah, what we're trying to do is the reason that it got narrower at the end is we wanted to allow it to telescope back in on itself. So the goal is if they need to pull the float, they don't necessarily have to take it all out. They could telescope the ramp or the gangway back on itself. So we have a 6 foot wide. I know it says 5, but it would be a 6 foot boardwalk, a 6 foot gangway, and then a narrower gangway. I think maybe we could bump that up to 5 now, so we could bring everything up another foot in the dimension and get that lower one a little bit wider. One of the things we're concerned is just the amount of weight that length of gangway is going to have at that width on the float, and making sure that the floats, could adequately support that moment where that bears on the floats themselves. But it's a good comment, and there were concerns voiced earlier too by folks saying, how do you get the kayaks down there, and how easy is it to have access from the racks down to the float?
Well, the bigger thing is not getting him down there. It's bringing him back up that,
Yeah.
back up.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, it's going to work best with a person on the bow and the stern, and,
Back.
yeah, and having enough width to be able to kind of opposite corners.
And there are wheels to walk a kayak, so maybe this wheel system, they take the kayak, put it on the wheels and walk it up.
Right, could be available. as
Have a
well.
wheel system available there.
Yeah, you do, yeah. So we are anticipating that we're going to be doing some planting around the section to kind of close down that opening, so that's going to get naturalized. We're not going to encourage walking down. We even talked maybe about a piece of rail fencing, to help in the vegetation, to help just discourage folks from trying to just go overland. Yeah.
Load up the Wizard Wagusa, they won't walk.
And yeah, Be shredded, but.
First time.
Get shredded walking there now.
So we'll work on the refinement of this, but yeah, I know this is 5 and 4. Talking with Carl, we're gonna go, we able to continue at 6 and 5, so everything will get a little bit wider coming down to the floor.
Great. Okay, let's talk about the boardwalk loop.
Sure, the boardwalk, a lot of the stuff I included just as sort of background, you've seen it all before, in terms of the loop itself, the overlook locations, and then the overall approach to the height of the boardwalk. What I wanted to talk today about was some of the research we've been doing on composites and the support system, and we can just kind of work through those decision points. So this is the loop configuration.
Can you go back for one thing that
Sure.
I am still concerned about the location, the top of the page there.
Let me put my cursor on this third overlook. Is that right?
Yes, and I still going from here to here.
Okay.
Because and I understand why the height of the boardwalk is going to be coming up, to provide additional clearance, and because of that, the profile is jumping there.
At the red, right? So the red is higher.
Right,
We pulled this
right.
back. Susan was part of that too, and we were looking really closely at the surrounding properties and trying to make sure, we weren't
Right.
too close. So this is the pulled back route. So we pulled this alignment back in the fall, and this is the lower elevation
Right.
in yellow, and then it transitions up to higher in red.
So I still see concern with that location because of the houses over there, whereas we're shielded.
For the
I thought we made this discussion and decided that this is what we're gonna stick with.
is what we call it, the best one.
I don't know if we totally settled on it. We're looking at it because I want to.
Well, you
Yeah.
haven't settled on it.
I
I
haven't
think the
settled
rest
on
of the committee may have. Am I mistaking? Are we, is this an issue about the location of that star now?
Yeah, I'm concerned about that just because the closest to where the house is in our neighborhood. The bottom two, I don't think are an issue. But the thing is we made a lot of effort to shield gateway aisles, which is fine. I think that was a good trade-off. But now I think all the impacts are being shifted to the west side. So I think as a compromise, the bottom two stars, I really don't see as much of an issue. But that other one basically is your vista is basically all the backs of the homes over there versus gateway aisle has no impacts now.
Like you don't have
So we shifted everything to the other side, which I don't.
Let's have a larger, a further out view so that we can see more to that north.
I don't have
You don't have one of those?
I don't have one loaded up. If we want to do a sidebar later, I can go through my files, but I don't have one in the PowerPoint for you.
I,
Just to be clear, each of these stars, same elevation and everything, all we're doing is adding like 4 feet or 3 feet.
18 inches.
Yeah,
18
probably 2 feet maximum, right,
Right.
beyond. So the idea is
But
just.
it's still the
provide a place.
location of where it is though.
The stars are lookout areas.
Correct.
Yeah.
Where would you move it if we couldn't have it there?
I don't know. We could look at moving it or eliminating that one.
Is your concern like a bunch of people? I didn't mean to interrupt, I'm sorry. 'Cause
Well, yeah, people
two to
hang out
4
there.
feet is like nothing.
I think my concern is where it is and the vista through is where the other ones, it's more shielded. Because the whole reason that the path got killed going down to the beach is Gateway Iowa was vehemently opposed to it because they didn't want to see it.
Right.
And that was the end of it. I don't see the issue is it's just, like I said, all the impacts are being shifted to the west.
Well, I don't know.
so just let me, a couple of quick.
Yeah.
So the end of it was because the Board of Selectmen put an end to it, not because of anything else. They didn't want the boardwalk to go all the way out to the,
Well, that was
To the Seagull
because of
Beach.
the
and
opposition.
they were the ones who said, just make a loop.
Right.
So that's why we're at the loop. And it wasn't
Right.
because we yielded to anybody.
Well, actually it was, but
Well, I don't want to argue
I'm
with
a
you, but I'm the
realist.
chair of this committee and I tell you, we didn't yield to anybody. We did what we thought is the best layout that is beneficial to all concerned. And one of the things we've done is we have listened to some of that. When we look at that house at the top corner, the end of that yellow line is where we changed that location. There's some vegetation there that the original design was to go further to them. So we've moved it
right.
further away.
We did ever so slightly.
So
Because,
I- if the committee wants to have an additional discussion about whether the adding or subtracting lookouts, I'll be glad to entertain it, but as far as I'm personally concerned, I thought this was done deal and we're moving on. And that it's an 18-inch bump out, if you will. It's not like we're putting benches out with binoculars to look back at people's houses. But Susan, I'll let you go.
When we toured the site,
Mhm.
it was October, correct?
November.
November, and I remember the sunset specifically. When we stood at that spot and looked toward the sunset, we were looking directly south. The houses, we were not looking across the roofs of the houses. They were more to our right-hand side.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So in the summertime, and the purpose of being here really would be sunset. Well, one of the purposes, but one of the nice vistas would be sunset. At sunset, are we looking then more toward the homes or more back towards Seagull Beach? We're looking back towards Seagull Beach.
I would say more towards the houses because east
The
is
sun's okay.
right, but you still get that view from the second star.
Yeah, okay, so you are concerned really at the height of the season with people out there,
Right.
sunset, you're really looking more toward those homes and across the roof of those homes out toward the sunset.
Correct.
Is there gonna be a closure time for this park at night?
It's dusk.
Dusk to dawn, probably.
I kind of disagree. I don't think you're looking backwards towards the houses. You would be looking. And I remember when we were here in November, I remember looking this
Yeah.
orientation.
So you,
Not this, well, I can't imagine it's ever gonna change to that orientation. You might have this and people will be kind of glancing back and forth. But this changed significantly. It wasn't just this line, it used to come out
Right.
here
And
There's an
and
interior.
turn back. So a
Right.
significant change has been made in order to protect that. And I think the orientation, having it go this way versus angled and like when you're coming back, looking more
Right.
towards the houses. So there's been some concessions that have been made on the west side. I understand that we had a little bit more to work with for concessions on this side because you do have this raised elevation with the woodlands on it. So you can kind of protect a little bit, but they're gonna get, once you get to this spot, you're closer and you're gonna be probably looking a little bit more towards the water and they'll have more.
Right, but if you actually looked at distance, and like I said, I understand, but the distance from Gateway to the yellow is substantially farther than from the yellow on the west side of the house. And that's why I'm saying it, where the bend is, went to the second star a little bit. No, not the first one, the second, right?
But if it's, we're kind of trying to put them right at the apex of a change. But what if it's like right to the other side? And so people standing here, they'll be looking this way. Are you concerned that people are gonna be standing this and then kind of looking
Yeah, maybe that is an option. It could just be tucked around.
on this side, for your orientation? Because this was a beautiful sunset,
I have no-
unbelievable.
I have no problem with that. I mean.
Eric, what is
I'm
the
okay.
status of the vegetation along with the houses are? As I recall, there was a lot, even though it was November, it was pretty vegetated, wasn't it? Low trees. We could see the roofs, I know that.
You could, in November, you're right, the leaves are off, but
What's
there's,
like in June, are those homes?
it's fairly
They're
heavy.
exposed.
All
Yeah.
phragmites.
Yeah, well, right in front to the south, but
This is
the east is
Right, but you're gonna be-
forested, yeah.
Right,
I'm just saying.
But you gotta
don't see
remember,
a lot
we're
of
gonna be up on
summer
we're gonna be above the phragmites
Yes.
on the structure.
So
True.
even at sunset, we're looking.
You put up a
straight ahead.
GIS map?
Right, okay.
No, I just did.
I know, I'm just saying, you could do it on the screen and we wouldn't be,
I've been kind of passing this around. so.
yeah, no, I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd like to do, just kind of being aware of David's time, because there's some other things, is we can certainly, if we need to revisit the overlooks, I think that's worth you telling me we want to revisit that, and then I can prepare a little bit more material and we can look at it.
The orientation. I
You know.
understand your point. You don't want to be going this way, but if we're
Right.
going this way, that might be a
Right.
good compromise.
So is the consensus of
On the outside of it, not on the.
Right.
Not on the apex of the, right, we could carry it around, as Kathy's saying, you could carry it around the corner to that
Right.
side and more purposely direct it to the south and
Right, 'cause my
west.
question is like, basically, could you connect between here, and then you basically have a little bit of, there's some cedars and some other stuff that would shield it.
Right,
I
right.
think the consensus of the committee, so we can move on, is that we're fine with the way it is. And if you want to tweak it a little bit, okay, but I think we're all at least from what I understand from here, everybody in favor of generally keeping it the way it is and tweaking it however he can to,
To accommodate the visual impact.
yes.
I'm very sympathetic to people who are nervous about that. If we can do it in a way that, but I think having three of them is really important.
Right, and I think
Yeah.
it could be accomplished. Like I said, we could go around.
Just curve
walk
around.
around.
Right.
All right, so Eric, you got the general idea, right?
I think, yeah.
I do. I mean, I think there's an approach to kind of bring it around the corner. I mean, it may be possible. This area is higher, even though it's within the marsh. I mean, maybe there's a couple of cedars, as you said, or something that could be planted. I have to talk with Kelly about that. You know, it's right on it's in the intertidal zone of the high tide, but there are cedars that are isolated that are surviving out there. So they would visually maybe break it up a little bit if that's a concern. Just kind of what the aesthetics are from outside the boardwalk system.
We're talking about preserving as much as possible in the marsh. Is it possible to actually add trees within?
That's what he was talking about.
Right. I think not down not down at the high tide line, but we're at the upper range of the marsh, and that's kind of where we are. You can see the rack line is kind of that tan line through there. You know, so I think that there are some hummocky areas that have even more height. Maybe we could add a couple, particularly if there's a sensitive spot. I wouldn't try to, there's no way we're going to buffer or mitigate the whole boardwalk, but I think if there's a key area that just some foliage might make a difference.
Right, no, and I understand
Introduce
that.
that.
That was my thought. Like I said, the yellow ran down to there, and then you jumped up to the red. You
Oh, I
had
see
the
what you're
thing.
saying.
So basically, the height transition happened here in the hummock, and then that star was right
The
here.
tip between
And that would basically help hide it.
The other thing we did too is we recently did some vegetation analysis. It was a question we had regarding the height of the vegetation under the boardwalk, and in some areas it's marsh, so it's low, under a foot. But a thought of it is sort of the high tide bush, which is at the upper range, and so some of that's in the 3, 4, in some areas even 5 feet of vegetation, below. So there's a lot of it's not just a dead flat marsh like you would think, and then this elevated boardwalk. You actually have some transitional areas where it's a little more obscured because of the vegetation it's passing through. So just to kind of flip through again, going through the different approaches that we talked about, the different heights, the different elevation of the marsh, the helicals, and then we've been looking and spending a little more time thinking about composites, which is a conversation I had with Kelly and the Conservation Commission. And one of the interesting things about composite pile is that we could possibly do them as a monopile. So this is one of the things that we wanted to look at as a single pile. We showed you this before. One of the biggest benefits might be if we could change the beam to a different type of beam, we might be able to move the piles further apart. So further apart, less impacts in the marsh, less piles. But what we started to find, the more we looked at that, it's definitely going to make the beam taller. So it's going to sort of raise the height of the boardwalk because we need to keep the clearance below. And it also is going to start to get really expensive to get these increased spans when we were looking at, trying to increase the span length to 20+ feet. So while it was sort of possible practically, I think there were some other downsides to it in terms of the boardwalk getting just thicker, visually, and exponentially, more costly.
So, not to interrupt you, but let me ask a quick question if I can. So if we go back to the screen 4 with Boardwalk Loop with the boat in it.
This guy?
Right. So when we're measuring from the marsh up, where does the measurement stop to get the height? At the top of the planks or under with
At the bottom.
Bottom of the beam.
So the support beam there, it measures to that spot.
Right, that's what we're measuring our clearance down.
So it's from that beam down that you'd have to get the 2 feet that.
Yeah, and generally we're able to do that without much, there's enough elevation change in the marsh that we're able to do that pretty easily.
So the pier cap is not considered.
We're not including that in the assessment. The pier cap, something that's
It
been
doesn't
a little bit in
have to be.
flux.
So we're
Right, so we're looking at from the bottom of the
Okay.
structure itself. Yeah,
Okay.
the span.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
No, it's a good question. And this is a good example to kind of look at.
Right.
So one of the things that they're able to do here too, this is a residential dock. As you can see, it's relatively narrow. It might be only 4 feet wide. And they're not subjected to kind of the same calculations. We're designing a public walkway system in boardwalk. So our structural analyses have to be a little more detailed and more well-developed than what they've done in residential settings. But that said, the monopile configuration like this could work. I think the reality we came to is that probably it's best to keep it on the same 15-foot spacing like we're doing with the conventional timber beams. because of the taller beams and the costs of the composites.
So talking composite would be the vertical member, but more traditional wood or pressure treated wood will be the horizontal members.
That's where we are. Yeah, we've gone through a process of looking at both, and while there were benefits, there's definitely downsides, and then the cost is almost 3 times as much as a wood beam system.
Yep. Next. We can save that money for our bathroom facilities.
Save the money we didn't have.
We do have to be mindful. The test to actually doing this is going to be discussion.
Too far.
Wait a minute, we got 2 discussions going on at
Sure.
the same time.
What happens at that longer spacing is it's harder for wood to go much more than 15 or 16 feet on center. We're using 16, which is 15, which is, essentially a 16-foot beam, if you will.
Right.
It's 15 feet apart. If we go longer, wood gets thicker, wood gets a lot more expensive, and there's just more challenges to it. So we're sort of in where wood is kind of most efficient range.
At 15 feet.
Yeah, the 15. Like, again, we might be able, as we refine the design, we might be able to stretch it out a little bit, but not up into the 20-foot range without going into a composite. Yeah. System.
David had something he wanted to add.
I was just going to say, we also have to be mindful not only of the cost of installation, but the cost concern about long-term
Maintenance.
And everybody, whenever the public's going to get a chance to look at this and comment, somebody's going to say, well, what about Gray's Beach? We every 10 years that thing gets washed away with an ice storm.
Yeah.
Is this going to be designed in a way that it's not going to have that kind of catastrophic failure issue,
Right.
or at
Right.
least minimize it?
No, it's a good question. I think that's how we got to kind of thinking about the composites and the monopile. I mean, one, the composite is an inert material, so it's not leaching anything over in time into the marsh. It's got a proven track record of 30 plus years on a lot of installations. And it's also plenty strong. I think what we're looking at now is, are there different configurations of a composite pile that would work? And what we're finding is the composite piles are a little more priced a little bit more affordably than the helical anchors. So the helical anchors, if you remember, were screwed down in, but they were exposed steel shaft. And so in the marine environment, even with the coatings, that steel shaft is probably subject to just accelerated, deterioration. Corrosion, we looked at jacketing options, but again, that corrosion is kind of concealed if they're jacketed. So there might be something going on that you can't quite see. So we kind of landed on composites as while it was maybe more footprint, it might mean less visits into the marsh over time, might be more sustainable in that regard, that you're not having such routine maintenance. Being an inert material was interesting to everyone as well. So now what we started looking at is the monopile, as I'm showing you here, is it stiff enough to do what we want? Because there's lateral loading from ice and heavy tides and things like that. Or is there a possibility that a twin pile configuration of composites, and that's this next slide, at a smaller diameter could be kind of the middle ground between a monopile, which relies on a single configuration, helicals, which would be 3 configured smaller, or maybe a twin, say 8-inch in this scenario, with cross spacing between them. And this is a more conventional look, like, most scenarios you see for boardwalks look something like this. With a composite, we think we can be down in the 8-inch diameter, so not as big as the big wood timbers that you're used to seeing.
My concern with this, though, is it's more susceptible to damage because you have twice as many piles. They're smaller, so the embedment's less. And on top of it, you have the cross bracing.
Right.
So there's a lot more to maintain.
There's definitely more sort of to this to have stuff get hung up in it, if that's kind of what you're saying. Going back,
Correct.
The marsh influence.
going back to this one,
2 holes versus 1.
the lateral. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd go down to an 8-inch, and so the footprint of 2 8-inches, the math comes
Right.
out as slightly less than a 12-inch. By the time, because they're circles, not squares. But I think when you start to look at that, you get into questions of how much, if it's a monopile, how much is it lateral? Like, so we're going through the process of looking at the lateral calculations in terms of the loading, and there's 2 things to consider. It's sort of how much does it bend with tide and then uplift. When it's a helical anchor, I think we talked about this, they're kind of screwed into the ground. So there's not really this ability for it to float away in a big event. Here, we definitely need deeper piles because we need that friction to hold the boardwalk down to the mud. And so if you have a pair of piles, there's a little bit of redundancy there. So you have a little bit more holding capability. Maybe they could be a little shorter and a little more affordable than the monopile. But you've got more material because you've got a pair instead of one. So there's all sort of nuanced evaluations that we're looking at. in
Right,
terms
and
of
the
the
cross
system.
bracing too, so.
Right. You
So if
definitely,
you-
you
if
definitely
you-
would tie them together like we're
'Cause-
showing here.
Because every once in a while, if you do have icing and you have a king tide, then you have the cross bracing, forget it. It's, you just junk the whole.
Right, you could have,
So-
stresses on that. So I mean, maybe you're saying, we really,
I'm
We
looking
like the
long-term
monopile.
Maintenance, it's just,
I-
you don't want to be fixing it, you know.
Not a big bugaboo.
Not have to worry about ice. Global warming's gonna fix that. So if we only have to make sure we're high enough that when the flooding comes, it doesn't wipe out the.
Brackets for the made out of.
that's a stainless steel bracket in that configuration, but it's a
It's up
pretty,
higher.
it's also
It's a wood
heavy,
cap.
it's a heavy, thick
I think.
bracket. It's probably a 4-inch strap that's, probably a 1/4 inch
Stainless.
or 3/8 thick. Yeah, it would be stainless.
You should put those in, get rent them.
Yeah.
Think what Carl might get for those this season.
Yeah, how many years of wait to get on that? Okay, what else you got, Eric?
So just to kind of close out where we are, I just want to make sure you're okay with this because it's a little bit different than where things started. The direction when we kind of came into this phase of the project was to really pursue the helicals. The idea was the equipment would be up on the helical as we
Right.
built it on the decking. What we found out is that basically in any of these scenarios, the equipment's going to be in the mat just because of the size of the anchors and the height above the marsh for the system. And so once we kind of said all the equipment will have a temporary impact on marsh mats, it sort of equalized the assessment. So now we can look at maybe a driven pile to some degree, and then what the footprint is of that. And there are different techniques to kind of get those in. But if we can keep those piles small enough, it can keep the equipment smaller. The composite piles are lighter than a wood pile, so there's not as much weight on the marsh. There's not as much equipment required to move them around. One company we're working with said a couple of guys could carry, a couple of laborers could actually move the piles instead of a separate crane to rig it and then move it over or transition the piles around the site itself. So as long as there's buy-in and support, we're going to continue in this direction as far as looking at the composites, looking at the single, and looking at the
Right.
paired. And that may be where we land for 30%. That we've kind of got these two options. They both have different sort of footprints associated with them, but there's benefits in terms of longevity for the composite, and there's redundancy if you end up having to.
And you might be able to get away with not using crane mats if you use something with the really high flotation tracks. Because they make vehicles that are more like a snowcat, with a
Right.
really wide track, and they actually have dump bodies on them. You can actually bring the
Right, on
materials out
those-
vehicles.
Yeah, like a tracked dump truck.
It's very, very light impact.
And we use the marsh mats for the boring on lightweight equipment.
Right.
So, they weren't a timber mat. It was an alternative, like a fiberglass mat.
Right, because mosquito control actually has a unit that they have it.
Oh, really?
It's based on snowcat, yeah.
Huh, that could,
They're going out doing trenching for the ditches.
that kind of
So-
solution.
Yeah.
So you're looking right now for us to give you hey, keep going forward.
Yeah, because I think it is a touchstone that helicals had been a certain direction. It was it's a very small permanent impact, but there are also several other things that I think we found challenging with that system. And so composites seem to offer some opportunities. Want to make sure we can keep going.
It seems like the commission, in my understanding is the commission was very supportive of the composite.
Is that?
Yeah.
Was that my,
Yep.
am I reading that correctly or?
Yeah, they like.
Okay, so.
Okay, so march on. We're good.
Yeah. Okay, great.
It looks better too.
Yeah, I do. I like the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, so they need to do some more calculations. Originally, it was all based on helicals. So they're gonna look at both the monopole with the brackets, but also the two 8-inch, okay.
And we'll come back with his recommendation as to what he thinks is best.
Yeah, we saw the matrix before. We're going to build into the matrix, but part of that
Yeah, that-
discussion will be permanent and temporary impacts.
Yeah, have a comparison of the impacts between those two. I mean, my automatic reaction is that the monopole is less impactful, but
It's not, it's weird. It's
Well,
the area of
well,
8 inches, like
Yeah,
0.3.
well, we gotta look at O and M now,
Visually, it's.
because in O and M, if we have to go back multiple times.
Two is
to
not-
equipment, fix stuff versus one and done, and you get a 30-year life out of it versus it's gonna get more storm
That's what
damage. We gotta go in every 5 years. I mean,
So
Yeah.
you're looking for the permanent impacts from both the monopole and.
yeah, I think we
the
need
two.
to look at both.
Okay.
We need to. Construction and the.
Well, I mean, if conservation likes that better, if the cost is less going in And if the stability and long-term maintenance is better, why would we not go in that direction? And yeah.
I think she's talking about the monopole
Monopole.
versus
I know.
2 8-inches.
Just
Yeah.
in
Yeah, in terms of
Yeah,
material.
Beautiful summary.
Whatever works.
The nuance of these discussions is that one of the things that we worry about is the flex of the monopole, right? So to make the monopole more rigid, it's probably going to be deeper, right? So
Right.
you're dealing with like bigger pieces out there, and that means bigger equipment on the
Right.
marsh to handle them. A pair of 8-inch
Right.
potentially could be shorter because they're two doing the work of one. So their stiffness is it's a redundant
Right.
system. So what we might find is smaller equipment with
Right.
2 smaller piles versus bigger. And that's fairly nuanced discussion,
Well,
but
because
we're looking
it's-
at that a little bit.
Right.
We're gonna let you guys work that out.
Yeah, just so you understand the
Right,
background. of
But
that. Yeah.
because it's bigger and it's deeper though, long term, you're gonna have less issues of storm damage and other issues.
Right,
You know,
you could.
so,
Okay,
and that's
so-
gonna be a big thing at public hearing. We don't want, this is not gonna get damaged every time there's a nor'easter.
No.
And that's very important.
Yeah.
that Jim brought that up.
Skyscrapers have to fly.
Yeah, you have to, everybody has to bend or you won't be there. So
Yeah.
you have to have some movement. So that's what we've been doing with composites, right?
We're good.
And this is kind of where we are is we're at the goal was the 20-foot span. We really can't do that. So we're back to the 15. So we're 15 spans with composites. And then the last, Kathy wants me to just remind everyone about schedule. So we're kind of pushing now into April for sure. And we were behind where we wanted to be for the 30% package. But my goal remains to finish that this month. And I talked to Kathy a little bit about, and there might be some holes in that package. And one of the holes we didn't talk about today is the bridge. And that was something you tasked me back with a while back saying, can you look at the bridge and come up with some concepts of, yeah, right. And it's one of those things because we wanted to solve the kayak launch and some of these other things. We're dealing with some traffic issues earlier as well. So we'll have a 30% package and there'll be some certain areas that we'll say, okay, we got to spend a little more time on the bridge design. We might dedicate half a session to, bridge options and how that's going to work. But I'd like to get most of the plan stuff together and get it committed to paper, finish that package. You have a briefing in May, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's the other
planned?
thing. The Board of Selectmen have requested an update on where we stand on the Riverwalk Park. I think we had talked about May 3rd, but I know that Jim can't be there
Yeah, I won't be back till the 9th.
till the 9th. So we may want to look at rescheduling that to when, Jim can be there.
The selection.
So, well, I meant to look.
Well, I'll be
at
back.
the schedule to see.
I think the 9th is a Monday. The 9th is a Monday, so if they can just push it back to the 10th.
1 week, okay.
Yeah, I've got to go to Georgia. So,
I meant to look and see what their schedule was.
So that would give us a little time. We'd refine some of the things we talked about today, but we want to get the 30% codified, highlight the couple of pieces we need to work on and then try to move into refining
How
those.
big of a span are we talking for the bridge?
It's about 40 feet, 38 somewhere. in there.
Could you look at substituting this for that location, glue lambs or split plates between them or?
Yeah, I know you had mentioned that.
Yeah.
and We were going to talk about how to build it up on the site, which would be easier in some ways.
No, you got it, people. You're fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
see you later, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay,
No, I did have a couple of questions on the kayak launch, but
no,
there are kind of more detailed things that we can.
I don't know, everyone knows that,
I know what you're gonna tell.
okay, Kelly Grant is unfortunately leaving the town of Yarmouth.
Just,
Her last day is April 14th.
14.
we are deeply gonna miss you. You've been a great contributor to the town of Yarmouth. We appreciate what you've done.
I appreciate it.
Where are you going?
I'm going to work for a land trust organization, the Compact.
Oh, good for you.
Okay,
Yeah, based in Brewster.
Good for you.
I think my wife does that work.
So we've been tapping into Carl because he's retiring, tapping into Kelly because she.
Right, I forgot to mention, we had a good site walk with Kelly in mid-March to look at some of the final geometries on the paths. And she's been very available to help us kind of refine these last.
So just as a curiosity, how does this affect us? It's all about us. So with you leaving, conservation
your job?
hearings, et cetera, who picks up where you're leaving?
So there will be a replacement me at some point in hopefully the near future. And I'm sure whoever they bring in is going to be, be able to step right in and.
So we're not gonna,
They have posted the position and there's actually been interviews.
Oh, okay.
So there is some progress.
Yeah, and I think it's good, that we've had some conversations with the commission, so I feel like we're kind of all on the same page as to where we're at now.
so we can refuse to let you leave if things get. Just want to know.
Trust me, we've begged and.
Are there points though in the decision-making process, Jim, that we actually are gonna have the commission check off something in
Yeah.
her absence?
The next thing is the actual notice of intent, which is
Right.
gonna be a little bit way down the line, and I
Yeah.
certainly hope that we would have.
Hopefully we'll have someone on
Yeah.
board by then.
Yeah.
They will.
And the person won't take 6 months to get up to speed.
No.
And we've had a couple of briefings with the Conservation Commission and meetings with the agencies is just kind of background. So, they'll have a learning curve. It'll be very hard to fill Kelly's shoes, but we think we have a plan, and there's enough sort of documented progress and intention as to how.
We're gonna get to the point where they need to say something and there's no one there to say it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I was,
Yes.
Be someone here by that time.
but we know that she hasn't left the Cape, so we can always and if you're not leaving the Cape, then we'll just make sure we have your address. Jim, when we need you.
Be parked in the parking
Okay, let's try to move this meeting along, and Kelly, we wish you nothing but the best in your
Good
job.
luck.
For you, yay, for them, and sad for us. Minutes, I think it's the next.
Yeah.
I have a motion to accept the minutes of the February 15th meeting. I have a second, motion from Susan, a second from Bud, I think I heard. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Me,
Staying.
because I haven't been.
You guys are pretty good at it. You did. Okay. The next is discussion update project Board of Selectmen and naming of the park. We had a quick discussion about the May 5th and whether we can move that back.
Yep.
So what I'd like to comment on about the park naming thing. So you all remember I talked to you about Memorial Park and all that other good stuff, and I've had a little bit of time to think that I think we should stick to the plan. And that is maybe we come up with some sort of a, I see the Sea Camps and Brewster are doing a naming thing. And maybe we go back to the idea of doing a naming contest
Yeah,
for, and let's target if we can, the fall town meeting. We don't have enough for this town meeting, but
Do you have to go to the town meeting to name a park?
no, as the time frame to have it done.
have it
I
done.
mean, we can pick a date and time, but and then you can announce it at a town meeting or something.
I think the selectmen have to. approve.
Yeah, 'cause-
Yeah, yes,
They're responsible.
I think what we would do when we give the update is say that we would really like to start the process of naming the park and we'd
Yes.
like to have a contest and
Yeah.
open it up.
That's a great
Do you
idea.
have any parameters that you'd like to
Yep.
set?
Exactly.
And if not, we'll let it go, obviously knowing that you guys will talk about it, but then you can make a recommendation.
Yeah, and
to the
that-
Board of
that-
Selectmen, But it's always up to them.
They might want us to, if there's 50 applications, wear it down to their,
Probably would like-
there's 5 for pick from or something. So they may want to, well, let's put that in our discussions.
I think that's a great idea.
And then we can, because my thought is if we want to find a place to memorialize people in town, then part of when we start looking at the event space and stuff, things that we need to have discussions about are things like maybe that's an area we make for memorial space. Public art is another thing we need to talk about, whether we're gonna put statues and art and stuff in the finished projects. So I think that's all stuff we can continue to work on, but obviously the key right now is getting through the permitting, get Eric taken care of. But these are things I just wanted people put in the back of your heads and think about that we're gonna have to discuss in the future.
So we'll probably have some type of memo packet or something for the Board of Selectmen. If it's okay with the board, I can work with the chair on that, or if you felt like you would need to meet again. It's just kind of updating them on the progress we've made.
I'm okay, you're working
For
with
the
the
May
chair.
10th meeting, is that what you?
Yeah, if it's the 10th, but yes,
Whatever it
whatever,
is,
yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Will they want Eric there?
The more we get into some details and the questions you have, would think that it would be great to have Eric there. I don't know what.
For the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Sure. When we landed, but we think the 10th. Right?
Yeah, well, I don't know if they're meeting on the 10th.
Look at their calendar.
But yeah, we'll coordinate on that.
Okay. Does anybody else have any new business? Any old business? Any business?
I guess the only thing I want to mention, Eric, is definitely, I don't know if you found more information, we're using ePay for the decking and the railing system.
Yes, we've been.
Okay, good, because we had a path of ours that's in the construction, was caught fire over the weekend in Mattapoisett.
What caught fire?
It was a path, a shared use path, and a bridge structure down in Mattapoisett.
What was
So-
it made out of?
Pressure treated,
Yeah.
so no good. Well, the problem is the public uses it and the
So the
public.
public
lights
caught it
things
on
on
fire.
So, and we've had our own situation
Spontaneous
where,
combustion.
I used to get pressure treated wood to get on fire.
well, Bass Hole had an issue where the composite decking was lit on fire there once upon a time. So what I'm trying to say is EP is it's bulletproof and you would have pressure treat underneath it, but it'd be protected.
Can
So
you,
it's really-
can you engrave in it?
Yes,
That's all
Yeah. we can sell planks.
that's the,
We can sell planks.
that's what I'm thinking.
You're looking at it by the foot. So, yeah.
No, we're gonna charge by the letter.
If it's, if it's a more expensive plank, it would probably be a more expensive cost.
It's
but-
durable though, too. It won't wear out
No,
as
no, I'm
quick
just
too.
saying,
So
when
I
we
think
charge
that's
people right now, I think it was
beneficial.
like $150 for Bass Hole. It would need
Yeah.
to be something
Well, this is gonna be
more
nice.
expensive to compensate for
Yeah,
the fact that
The
we're
cost of
using.
engraving.
Yeah.
All right. All right, anything else? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Nice job.
Outstanding. Thank you all very much. Eric, thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Ellie, I'm not. Thank
Did it burn? Like, not
You're not-
possible.
Well, the decking caught fire and it actually started scorching into the beams
We
underneath.
will always.
So it was a separate bridge. What happened? It wasn't on the elevated board. It was one of the bridges over a creek it goes.